Good day, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome back to Splints and Whiskey, the podcast that is for military medicine, first responders. We talk a lot about training. We talk a lot about mental health. We talk a lot about just health out in the field for our battle buddies, those guys to the right and the left of us each and every day that are going through it hardcore. And we know that there's a lot of stuff going on. My name is Liz. Before we get started with our guest today and I have him introduce himself to you, I want to thank our sponsor, Life Autonomous Care Consultants. Life Autonomous Care Consultants, if you need any gear for training or gear for combat medicine or gear for the field if you're a first responder, such as IFACs all the way up to medical mannequins, then reach out to Life Autonomous Care Consultants, LACC inc.com. And thank you to those guys for sponsoring us. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce you guys to someone that has changed my life in literally the past 3 weeks. His name is Seth Gehle. Seth is here with us from Atlanta, Georgia. And Seth is going to tell us a lot about himself and talk a lot about really resiliency and I want to highlight just two things about him that we're also going to put in the feed at the end. Number one, he just launched a best-selling book, and it's called Strength Behind the Shadows. Is it behind or beyond?
Be- Strength beyond the shadows.
That's what I thought. Strength Beyond the Shadows. It's about Seth's life, his upbringing, and how he became who he is today. And who he is today is a stand-up, fucking awesome man. And I'm so stoked to have you here. So, and then if you want to have any more information about him, then you can go to his website. We're going to put it up on here at the end, sethgehle.com, right? That's it, sethgehle.com. Sweet. All right, Seth, please introduce yourself to our body of believers and tell us about yourself, man. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. It's always an honor to, you know, speak and share my insights and the stories that I've kind of stories that I have through the life that I've lived. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just turned 31, and when I tell people that I wrote a memoir, it's usually like you're only 30, you're only 31. What could you have wrote about in just a short amount of time? And to be honest, I've lived quite the life in just 30 years. So to understand me, I think you have to go back to the acorn, so to speak, right? So if you want to understand the oak, you have to go back to the acorn. If you want to understand what's in front of you, you have to go back to the foundation, to the roots. You have to go back to the beginning, and that'll usually paint a picture for why somebody is the way that they are. I say that because I
Yeah.
get asked all the time, and a lot of times people get asked, why are you a certain way? Why do you act this way? Why do you behave that way? Why do you do these things that don't make sense? Or why do you behave it? We have these certain habits or tendencies, and generally the general population will ask somebody, why are you crazy, or whatever it is, right? PTSD
Mhm.
or whatever it is. They want to know, why are you behaving a certain way? And the better question is what happened to you? What happened?
Yeah.
What happened to you in your life, or what didn't happen for you? And so my journey, if we go back to the beginning, my journey started off in 94, Northwest Ohio. I was born to my mom had me and my two sisters back to back years. So me and my older sister were 11 months apart. Me and my younger sister are 13 months apart. My mom and my dad, they got into a fight when I was about 1 or 2 years old. My father tried to kill my mother. He stabbed her multiple times in the head, tried to kill her. She was able to get away, and my father went to prison. My
Hmm.
father went to prison long enough for me to not really know who he was growing up. And because of that, my mom was a single mother with three kids. Single mother with three kids. She started drinking. She smoked a lot of weed, and this was like 20 years ago when smoking weed was a federal crime.
Right.
Was really really bad, right? 20 years ago. So uh, he was smoking a lot, drinking a lot, working a 12-hour shift factory job. My sisters and I began to kind of raise ourselves during the day, and we were bouncing around from different. If we didn't have a babysitter, we were at home by ourselves, cooking and cleaning and taking care of the house by ourselves at just 5, 6, 7 years old.
Mm.
Whenever we did have babysitters, we were constantly bouncing around, and unfortunately, one of those babysitters, they had a bunch of teenage boys. One of the boys ended up molesting me. On one of the nights I was there, he pulled me up into his bunk. And as far as like sexual abuse goes or molestation, that was very mild in a way. It's all detrimental and tragic and all those things, but in comparison to what could have been or what would end up happening eventually, is relatively mild. So
Mhm.
I do remember it. I did report it, and the standard like response from his family was, our son wouldn't do that. He didn't do that. It's a lie. Whatever. That's a pretty
And
typical
Seth,
response.
how old were you then?
I was about 5, 6 years old when that happened.
Wow.
And so that's a pretty typical response when a kid does report something like that, especially once again 20 years ago where things were just completely different.
Yeah.
And so they kind of swept under the rug. We kept going back to the babysitter's house, all these things. In addition to that, I was also exposed to porn at 5, 6 years old, watching like full blown VHS tapes. My mom, when she was at work, we as kids we were naturally curious, so we would dig around the house, we'd get into things, and we found her little collection of videos that she had, and we watched them like they were movies. Like it was just we just sat down, and so we had this completely like this big misinterpretation of what love was, what relationships were, what
Yeah.
that interaction was, and that was really more detrimental than what I realized at that young age. And as life would go on, get a little bit older, 7, 8, 9 years old, my mom, we're bouncing around, we're moving every year, we're moving multiple times a year, changing schools all the time, very unstable place. Around
Right.
7 or 8 years old, my mom one day just kind of, it almost seems so random to me now, but at the time she was just kind of like, "Hey, do you want to go see your father?" And I'm thinking, okay, well, let's go see him. Um, and he was in prison, so we went to the county jail to go visit my father. And so that's my earliest memory of meeting my father, is in the jail, in this room with all these cubicles, talking to him through a plexiglass window with a black phone on the wall.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, I couldn't even talk to him. I just sat there and cried the whole time because it was such an emotional moment for me. So that's my first memory of meeting my father. That's the earliest memory that I have of him. I have pictures of me and him when I was a baby, but obviously I don't remember those days. And shortly thereafter, my mom, she began around probably 8, 9 years old. She started getting into harder and heavier drugs, and it was very consistent. So every single day there were drugs in my house. There were always people at our house drinking and smoking. For
Mm.
whatever reason, our house was always the place where people would come together and hang out and party and all those things. So that's what everybody was always there. And I'll never forget this. I was coming home from school one day, kind of coming up the stairs. I looked in my living room, and my older sister was in there smoking a blunt with all these adults. She
Oh
wouldn't
my
have been old.
gosh.
Yeah, she wouldn't have been older than 11, 11 or 12 years old. And all of these adults are in here, and she's just sitting in the circle, passing the blunt around. And I at that moment, even just me at 10 years old, I knew that my life wasn't going to turn out that way. For some reason, I had something inside of me that just said, like, I'm not going to adhere to this. I'm not going to be this way.
Mhm.
I know that there's more for me out in this world. And it's kind of crazy because, around that same time, my mom began to get more physically violent, where she was close hand punching us, grabbing us. She always had this thing where she'd grab us by our face or I had really long hair, so she'd grab me by my hair and slam my head against the wall. And she was just very violent when it came to like punishing us.
Mhm.
And,
Was she
you know,
violent? Can I ask a question about that? Was it was it always if she was just intoxicated, or was she naturally like she was sick we know she was sick too, right? But was she sober violent too?
it's hard for me to say. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't remember if she was sober or drunk. You know, I don't know if I ever maybe now that you asked that question, I don't know if I ever recognized the difference between her being sober and drunk.
Wow.
I don't think she was like incoherent. She wasn't drunk to the point where she was functioning and all of those things. Like she was she seemed like she knew what she was doing all the time. She was just
Right.
always drinking and smoking. It was kind
Yeah.
of just in that environment, and in that environment, it was just everybody was just kind of drinking all day long. Like it was just they weren't trying to get slammed and wasted. They were just
Yeah.
like a constant. To me, it
It was
probably
like
was
a
more.
lifestyle. It was like that was like just their lifestyle. It was all day. It was
Yeah,
just, yeah. I remember the story from Soft White Underbelly that you talked about when she was driving with you. And I don't want to jump ahead, but you know how she was driving and you were like, she might have been really stoned. I know she had been drinking, but you were like, she might have been really stoned, but she was ready to say, she said, I'm gonna fucking kill all of us or something along those lines. And so that's why I asked. So it wasn't like it was like mom blacked out. Is more that yours was the party house. That was the lifestyle it was, and all were welcome, and it was extremely transient. The people, the all that shit.
yeah, yeah. Like I don't think she really blacked out like ever
Right.
or at all.
Yeah.
I think she was just, now when you're under the influence, obviously you are less control of your emotions, and that's probably what was happening is that she just had enough in her system to where that little bit of like resistance or that filter that says, "Hey, I probably shouldn't do this," was just gone.
Right.
And so, that's probably why she was able to do the things to us that she did, in that car ride where she threatened to kill everybody in the car. And, you know, is that around that same time, I was 10 years old, 11 years old in the back of this car. I couldn't have been older than 11. I was in the back of that car, and, my mom, she's driving down this road, 25-mile-an-hour road. She's going probably 45, 50, 60. She was going fast enough that it was very alarming. Her boyfriend was in the passenger seat. Me and my sisters were in the back. He's yelling at her. Me and my sisters are screaming and crying. It's this very hysterical, chaotic moment. And it only lasted for 10 seconds, maybe 5, 10 seconds. And she's flying down the road, and everybody's yelling and screaming and panicking. And he, like you said, she turned around and screamed at me and my sisters and said, "Everybody shut the fuck up. I'm gonna kill us all."
Yeah.
And she was threatening to drive the car into traffic or into a light pole or a tree, whatever it was. And it's just very, very chaotic. And in addition to that, there's a story that I tell often where she kind of, my sister's gotten into a fight, and then my older sister came into my room. My mom kicks the door open and just out of nowhere, just closed hand, starts punching my sister in the mouth, starts punching her in the face repeatedly, like bouncing her head
Mm.
off the wall. I jump to the other side of my bed. I'm screaming and crying. I don't know what the hell's happening. And without any, like, there was no love, there was no compassion, there was no empathy for anything. My mom just looked at me and said, "What are you fucking crying about? Stop being a fucking bitch." Is what she, and I was 10 years old. And,
Jeez.
it's so crazy, all these things that I was going through. And for me to still have the mentality that I'm going to get out of this thing one day. And as we said, I'm an author now, and in that moment, during that time, around 10 years old, I read the book "A Child Called It," and that's a very, very, very popular, very renowned book on
Right.
child trauma and abuse.
Right.
And I remember reading that book, and that book gave me a new expectation on life, I suppose. Where I remember reading it and coming home and thinking, like, okay, if this guy wrote this book about his childhood and it impacts me this much, it means that much to me. I feel it so much in my own heart and soul as I read it. Then I can do something about this. Like I can turn my life around. I will tell my story to help out other people. That was my thoughts at 10 years old. I told myself
That's
one
so
day,
awesome.
yeah, I mean, I told myself one day I'll write a book. One day I'll tell my story and help out other people. Like somebody's gonna know this story and it's gonna help. And I
Can I ask a
thoroughly
question
believe that.
there? I
Yeah.
believe that too. I believe that with my own life. I believe that too. I feel like I sing and play guitar. I feel like every time I fall on my face, it's with a microphone in my hand and a camera. It's like my life is televised, right? And I mean, I don't know. It's crazy, but I'm cool with that. I guess I've always felt comfortable with saying like, yeah, I have anxiety that's profound. Yes, I have PTS. It's profound. I have to deal with this stuff, right? Do you feel like in a way, and I hope to not get too spiritual on you, are you like, do you feel like that there's definitely a calling, right? Is there like was it like there's like an anointing or like a higher power or something that said like I gotta, because I, or is it just your in your mind that your strength of the resiliency in your mind, do you think? Maybe the strength to help people. Maybe that's it. Or the desire.
I'm not a spiritual or person of faith or anything like that. So I don't believe. I know a lot of people say, God's plan and God had his hand on me and these kind of things. I don't personally believe that. I don't think that
Yeah.
there's, I mean, to be quite honest, I kind of have a, not in a bad way, but a rather nihilistic view of life where I think this brings up an interesting point with purpose and calling and things like that, where people are
Yeah.
looking for their purpose, people are looking for their calling, they're floating through life and they're just kind of like they feel they're wasting their time or they don't know what they're doing here. And what I have kind of came to understand is that, in my own opinion, there's no point of us being here. So you have the opportunity to give your life purpose, whatever, in
That's
whichever way that is.
killer.
You can
Yeah.
just go and give your life purpose. You don't have to answer to some like higher calling, so to speak, or find some higher calling or wait for some higher power to tell you how to live your life or how to behave or how to do things. You can just kind of pick whatever you want to apply purpose to, just go and give it purpose and live and do your thing.
Mhm.
Right now, my purpose is my book and my speaking and all of those things. And that's not always going to be my life. I know that. It could be over tomorrow. It could be over in a year.
Yeah.
And part of my for me to have a happy and successful and good life, you just have to give whatever it is that you're doing purpose,
Yeah.
and or go and do something that provides you purpose and motivation and direction. So I guess to answer that question, like I don't feel like anything ever called upon me. I just had a natural drive to help people. I've always wanted to help people. I've always been a
Yeah.
helper. I've always been somebody who shares, somebody who cares. I've always been a very empathetic and kind of compassionate person, and especially as a kid. I was very caring of other people. Um, and really, I think what it honestly what it came from was probably reading that book and a few other things I'll get into here in a second. But people who stepped into
Mhm.
my life and helped me. And I had mentors and
Yeah.
teachers who helped me and cared for me. And that probably felt so good that I felt compelled to do that for other people. I wanted
Yeah.
to be that same kind of conduit of hope and healing and inspiration for other people. And thus,
Yeah.
I have become the man that I am today. So, yeah, I mean, in that time, I read that book, and then I had this idea that one day I would write a book. One day I would either, do a documentary or a movie, or I would do something to get my story out to the world to help other people.
Yeah.
And uh, oddly enough, in that same time that I had this deep ambition for what I would do in my life, I also became incredibly suicidal. At just 10 years old, I began to really just fantasize about taking my own life, how to do it. I thought about jumping, hanging, cutting, shooting, all of these things. And the only thing that, really the biggest roadblock for me as far as suicide goes, was I didn't want to feel pain. So I
Mhm.
knew that anything that I did, there was a chance that I would fail and that it would hurt. And I didn't want that. And I was scared of that. Like I was genuinely scared of the suffering of the suicide
Mhm.
or the death. And I didn't want to feel that. And so that was really my biggest like detractor of it. But I would think about it almost on a daily basis, pretty much all day long. And that went on for most of my life from around 10 years old and on.
And that
Uh,
wasn't just because of your relationship with your mom and your upbringing with your mom and that, it was because of another pretty hefty
well,
situation.
Well, the suicide ideations were definitely set in before I met Mondo, right? Who we'll get
Mhm.
into here in a second. So really, the suicidal ideation, it really did come from just living with my mom and not having a father, the drugs, the violence. We oftentimes didn't have utilities, which is really
Mhm.
not that big of a deal, but and like all these things compounding on one another, everything just gets like 10x. It's just like so much worse than it needs to be when your life
Yeah.
sucks and then you don't have gas, and so now you can't have a hot shower and you have to boil your bath water or like whatever, or you don't have power and you don't have food. Like those things are hard inherently, but then when everything else is sprinkled on top of it, it just makes it so much more difficult. And so with all of these things compounding, as a young man, I had to find a way out. Right, you find some sort of release, you find some sort of way to live your life to survive. And most boys will get into drugs, they'll get into gangs, violence, all of those things. I did a lot of stupid things as a young man. I ran around the streets, I broke into cars, I broke into houses, I stole from stores. I did all of those things, and luckily I never got in trouble and I never got into anything too serious. But what happened was I met a kid who lived down the street from me. I'll give him a fake name to protect his identity, but I call him Jacob in my book.
Okay.
And Jacob and I become best friends. Jacob is 5 years older than me. We become best friends. He takes me under his wing, whatever. Or just hanging out all day long, playing video games. He knows my life at home is jacked up, so he just takes me under his wing to protect me. And after a few months of knowing Jacob, I was over at his house one day, and this man walks in the front door. This man is he's about 6'6", 6'7", 380 pounds. He is built like a brick shit house. I mean, the guy looks like a left tackle. He's massive. So I say he's so big, but he doesn't look sloppy. Like, he looks very imposing. And I always say that he looks like he could throw a really hard punch. He's just got big
Mhm.
hands, big frame. And he walks in and he says, he sees me on the stairwell. He's coming downstairs. Excuse me. Sorry.
That's right.
I was coming down the stairs, and he sees me in the stairwell. I see him walk in the front door, and he says, "Hey, what's your name?" I said, "My name's Seth." He says, "Well, I'm Mondo." He says, "Do you like video games?" "I love video games." "Do you like pizza?" "I love pizza." "Do you like pop?"
Yeah.
"I love pop." He's like, "Well, cool. Why don't you come up to my house with me and Jacob this weekend, and we'll hang out and watch football, play video games, and eat pizza, and have a good time." And I was like, "All right, well, let me go ask my mom." So I go home, ask my mom. My mom says, "As long as you're with Jacob, you're good to go." So I go up to his house, and it was a great time. You know, we get up there, we play video games, we eat pizza, we're drinking pop, played video games all night long, didn't go to sleep. Wake up the next day, Mondo brings me home, and he says to me, "When do you want to come back?" And I said, "Well, I'll come back next weekend. Like, we can do this again and again and
Yeah.
again. Like, this was awesome." And so he's like, "Okay, well, I'll come and pick you up Friday after school." So sure enough, Friday comes around, Mondo shows up hour or two after I get off school, picks me up and go back to his house. And then from this point forward, it pretty much became routine that I would go to his house every single weekend for about the next 6 years.
Ooh.
And I mean, it was every single weekend, every weekend. Memorial Days, 4th of July's, Thanksgivings, Christmases, every chance I could, I would go to his house. I ended up meeting his whole family, his mom, his sisters, his, nieces and nephews. Mondo was this man who was 30 years old, which oddly enough is how old I am today. He was
Right.
30, he was 30, I was 10, and he was showing up to all these family events, all these family functions of his, with this little boy who, quite frankly, looked like a little girl. He had really long brown hair. I did look like a little girl. And in fact, when I met his mother, the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, you're too pretty to be a boy." That was the first thing she ever said to me. And I'll
Oh.
get into the significance of that here in a minute. So when I met Mondo, my life with my mom was really starting to turn south, right? That's why I say she was drinking a lot, she was getting abusive, and then she got a new boyfriend who then got her addicted to crack and cocaine. So
Oh.
not only was all the abuse and violence in our house, now there was some serious, really heavy drugs in the house. There was a lot of crack and coke, and with that comes the users of those drugs. And so every single day, these people would come into our house. They'd walk in the front door, they'd go to the back, they'd go to the bathroom, and they'd get high. 5, 10, 15 people a day. I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy. And in that house that we lived in, we moved to a new house with his boyfriend. And in this house, we get there, and me and my sisters go to find our bedrooms, and we're excited because even though we're moving into this, we moved all the time, but one thing that kids always love is to go find their rooms. And
Yeah.
so we're running around. We go find our rooms. My sisters find theirs. I go to mine, and I walk in, and it smells like, it smells like dog piss and shit. Is what it smells like. The whole room
Oh.
stinks. The hardwoods are buckled all the way across the floor. They're cracked and splintered and buckled. And they'll do that when they're exposed to weather. So anytime hardwoods are exposed to water, intrusions, things like that, they'll crack and splinter and buckle up. It'll ruin the floors. And my floors were like that because my ceiling had a 3 foot by 4 foot hole in it, completely exposed to the
Ah,
attic above. So I'm standing in this room, and it was really at this moment where I began to lose respect for my mother. In this moment, I was like, I was thinking to myself, I can't believe my life is actually like this. And I can't believe my mom put me in this room and put me, in this environment. I was truly just taken aback because it was my room was freezing cold. It was in the middle of winter in Ohio.
in freaking
And
Ohio, Northwest Ohio is so cold. I mean, I lived in Cincy, but I called up there. Oh my gosh. Yikes. I couldn't
yeah,
imagine.
so yeah, it was, I remember standing in that room. I could see my breath. I had this little 4-inch mattress laying directly on the floor. I had a thin little blanket, slept in that bed for, I don't know how long we lived in that house, but a couple years, I believe. And I slept on that little mattress, went to bed every night, and every night I just would lay there and cry, and I just did not want to be. I didn't want to exist anymore. The only thing I could do was hold on Monday through Friday to get back to Mondo's house. If I just
Yeah.
did that, I could go to Mondo's house every Friday, and I would have like peace and security and warmth and food, and that's what happened. So because of all these things too, I began to disclose more information to Mondo. I began to tell him, I didn't have a father. Told him my mom was abusive. She was really mean. She was violent. I told him that we were poor. We were on welfare. We didn't really have a lot of clothes. Didn't have a lot of food. Didn't have a lot of food. And the more I told Mondo about my life, the more he would reiterate the same things about his, where he apparently grew up with a single mother. He didn't have a father. His mother was abusive.
Wow.
He had two sisters. I had two sisters. Mondo was a great student in school. He was very smart. I was a straight A student in school. I was a
I
very
don't know
smart
how
young
you were a
man.
straight A student during all that. I do not know how, man. That's
Yeah.
major.
Yeah. I was a perfect kid in school. I was a class clown. I was funny. I was social, and I got perfect grades.
It's,
I didn't even have to try.
it's
And
amazing.
so, because Mondo and I had all these commonalities, we obviously built a lot of rapport between the two of us. Mondo, at this point in my life, at 10, 11, 12 years old, Mondo was the only person that I'd ever met in my entire life who could understand who I was. Because according to what he had said, he had gone through the same exact things that I went through as a child. And so he was the only person that I'd met at this point in my life who could understand me. There was nobody else
Right.
who I'd ever met, especially as an adult, that would confide in me the way that he did, or that I could in the way that I did to him. And so naturally we began to become closer and closer and closer. And unfortunately he took advantage of that relationship. So if you can't see what picture I'm painting by now, this is it. He basically began to sexually abuse me.
Mm.
Um and 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 we can kind of get into the intricacies of that if you'd like, but basically what happened is, as I went up to his house, he began to touch me. The touching turned into just kind of rounding the bases, so to speak, in a very
Yeah.
slow, methodical, strategic way. And by the time I was 13 years old, he had performed every type of sexual interaction that you can have with somebody, with me, to include he had eventually, finally raped me at 13 years old.
Jeez.
And while after that had happened, that was probably one of the darkest moments of my life. And I could, I remember everything about that night. And after it happened, I, was sitting in his bathroom and I was crying. I was sitting on the toilet trying to clean myself. And I was just crying and had my head in my hands and just wondering like why my life had to be the way that it was, why my mother was the way that she was. I didn't have a father. Now this guy that was supposed to be my best friend has done this thing to me. And I was scared that I had AIDS or HIV or some
Yeah.
sort of disease. I was scared that people would think that I was gay or that something was wrong with me. Like I couldn't report at this point because I was too scared. There was nothing I could do at this point other than just simply endure the pain. And so
God.
that's what I did. I got up, I took a shower, I walked back out into his apartment, put a smile on, and kind of kept playing this game that he was playing. And this went on for another about 2.5 years after that moment. And when I was about a month away from being 16, I was up at his house. There's a younger friend of mine there. Mondo had made a comment towards my younger friend, and he told him in a joking manner that if he was having a bad day, that Mondo could take him back in the bed and blow him.
Oh my
And
God.
I knew it wasn't a joke, even though in that moment I laughed it off. My friend laughed it off because Mondo was
Yeah.
like funny. He was charismatic. He was the family friend. He wouldn't. He was obviously joking. That was his whole persona. But I knew it wasn't a joke because Mondo would say those same exact things to me in front of other adults, and these other adults would just laugh it off. And so Mondo would tell these other adults exactly what he was going to do to me, and then he would take me back to his apartment and he would do it. And whenever he said it out loud, people just laughed because like Mondo wouldn't do that. And so when he did this to my friend, I knew what he was about to do. Thus, this was like the catalyst for me to say like, this is it. I'm not going to let this continue. And I knew that I could handle it. I knew that I could handle the pain and the suffering and the trauma of it, but I didn't want to see somebody else go through something right in front of me. And so I went home that weekend, and oddly enough, the person that I disclosed to, the person that I opened up and reported to initially was Jacob. Jacob is the kid who introduced me to him 6 years prior.
Right.
And I tell
Was he
Jacob,
still in the picture? Was he still your friend?
yeah, we were still friends, but he wasn't seeing Mondo anymore because he had gone off to college. And so like
Okay.
him going to college was like his way of breaking off with Mondo.
Mhm.
And oddly enough, like I'm telling Jacob that I needed to talk to him, and he comes to my house, and then I couldn't tell him because I was so scared. And Jacob broke the silence. Jacob said, "Hey, did Mondo touch you?" And I fell apart. It was a very emotional moment. And the next thing Jacob says to me is, "Well, he did it to me too." So
Ah,
in a very like coincidental, almost poetic way, for lack of a better word, uh, Jacob introduces me to the guy. 6 years later, I disclosed to Jacob about the same man who's our best friend for so long. He had done all the same, everything that he had done to me, he had done to Jacob prior for about 5 years as well. And
jeez.
so we go out and we go and report and we go to the hospital. Um, Kind of just a super crazy long story. I'll wrap it up. But the police officer shows up. His name is Chad Couples. Oddly enough, once again, in a weird, coincidental, poetic way, his wife was my teacher a couple years prior. And so, like, he shows up at the hospital, and I know his name, and I've seen him before because he was an Afghan and Iraq veteran. And he shows up, and I'm like, "Hey, I think I know you." I was, I said, "I think is your wife Mrs. Couples?" And he says, "Yes." So, Chad he would come to our school on Veterans Day and Memorial Days and kind of talk about
Yeah.
his time in the Army. And so it was crazy that he showed up because we had this immediate rapport. We had this immediate connection that we had. And that was so powerful. And, he asked me to tell him everything about the situation. I tell this man who I've only seen once or twice all of the deepest, darkest, worst things that you could imagine, and details that I probably will never repeat because it's not worth repeating to that extent. And I do
Mhm.
tell very detailed and graphic stories, but um in that regard, like I told him everything that had ever happened to me. And that was a lot for me to do at 15 years old, to tell another man who I really don't really know that much about me. And
Yeah,
so
that was, like, so cool that you trusted him, you knew him. I mean, poetic is perfect. I think it's a
yeah,
perfect word. Yeah.
yeah. And so he tells me thank you. He tells me he's very proud of me, all those things. um Kind of a long story short, he goes up to Bluffton that night. A couple hours later, he drives up to Bluffton, Ohio. He finds Mondo. He gets an out of custody confession from him, which is a big deal because
Yeah.
he didn't need a lawyer. He didn't need anything crazy. He didn't have to read him like Miranda rights or nothing like that. He just was just talking to him, and he was able to convince him to come down to the station. There was like no trapping or nothing like that. He was just They handled it so well that they were able to get an out of custody confession from Mondo on audio and visual. And um that was the end of Mondo's, or that was the end of like mine and my childhood, like kind of trauma story, I guess you could say. And that obviously
Gosh.
is a very condensed version, but yeah, I mean, he eventually was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was charged with 11 felony counts. They offered him a plea deal, and so he took 4 of the 11 counts for 2.5 years each. And so yeah, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the abuse of 2 boys for about 10 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, justice was served, but not really in a way.
Right.
He certainly should have gotten a beyond life sentence. And
Right.
fortunately enough, he would be free today with his sentence because that was back in 2011. But fortunately enough, he died in 2019 in prison. He died about a year before he was supposed to get out,
Mm.
and that was the end of his story. And since that day, 15 years ago, about I've done a lot, and this is kind of where the why behind my story, why I share my story, because despite everything that I've gone through, I'm not supposed to be here. It's rather
No, I
remarkable.
mean, thank you. I just have to stop and say thank you for being vulnerable and telling us your story first, and then also to who the audience is. Like, you got people that are like Chad, the police officer, listening every week and thinking they're at the point now where it's like a shitload of moral injury going on, and they're like being tired of being out in the streets right now. To hear that this is so awesome. So thank you, but keep going now. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me to be in the position that I'm in, for me to be honestly just a functioning human being
Right.
is rather remarkable, considering. So that's why I share my story now, and it's to show people that no matter what you've gone through, you can come out on the other end of these things if you choose to do it. If you make those decisions every day to be better, to just continue to fight and to heal and to challenge yourself and to push yourself, you can climb out of that hole that you started off in. Life
Yeah.
is not fair, and some of us are handed a bad hand. Some of us get a bad
Mhm.
deck of cards, and it is what it is. That's kind of why that's part of the reason why I don't give any of my life or any of my successes or even my challenges. I don't give any of the adversity, the trauma, or the wins, nothing positive or negative. I don't give any of that credit to anything. No higher
Yeah.
power, no other person, nothing. It is what it is. Those things happen. It is my responsibility now to live my life the best way possible. The only thing I'm in control of is myself.
Yeah.
And I think I have shown that, and I've tried to show that through my actions. I after that happened, I went to, graduated from high school, went to the army. I joined the army. I served in the military for 9 years, been all
Yes,
around the
thank you.
world. Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
combat tour or combat deployment. I did that in 2019. Came back from Afghanistan. I've been married now for almost 10 years. I've got 3 children. I am a accomplished ultra marathon runner. I ran 7 ultra marathons in 9 months to include a 100-mile race. I
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a jiu-jitsu competitor. I have a little stack of trophies over here on my wall from competing in jiu-jitsu. I now I'm getting into competitive powerlifting, and
Yeah.
I'm all about this idea of pushing yourself and challenging yourself. And if you want to know what something is like, you want to know how to be better, or you want to be stronger, you want to be an inspiration, or you want to be successful, or you want to be something special, you have to go out and do those things. It's so
Yeah.
easy for us to
Yeah.
sit in this couch or sit in this chair and look out into the world and say, man, I wonder what that's like, or man, I wish I could do that. Or so many people just lie to themselves every day about the things that they
Yeah.
can't do. And I've done I've done all of it. I've done the jiu-jitsu, I've done the powerlifting, like I said, ultra running, and now I'm a best-selling author. And when I say,
Right.
like, this is like a funny thing,
And you're
you hear
31. I mean, you're a baby. I mean, you're 31. This is amazing. Think about what else is coming. I'm so sorry. It's just awesome. Mm.
well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it too. It's just like I'm so young to be in a position that I'm in, and all I want to do, the whole point of my story is to show people that you have more left in the tank. You have so much
Yeah.
more that you're capable of that you don't even realize because you're unwilling to take on that responsibility. You know, you're unwilling to take ownership of your life. But if you can, if you make that decision to just say like, hey, this is on me now, you really can just go and just start firing off and just start accomplishing things. And for those who are listening that are on the maybe first responder side of things, I speak. That's a big audience of mine is speaking to first responders and behavioral health and
Really.
specialty courts, all that. And my message to them, like I just spoke in Kansas, was, you know, you have the opportunity every day to be that catalyst for change, to be that little light, right? At the end of the tunnel. Like that's who you are for
Yeah.
somebody. Somebody is navigating something in life right now and they don't have direction. They don't have hope. They don't have something out there saying, hey man, I'm right here. They don't have that lighthouse. They don't have somebody steady. They don't have somebody to love them, somebody to care for them. And you as a first responder, you have that opportunity. You don't even have to be a first responder. I mean, really, anybody in the world has the opportunity every single day to step up and be that rock, that foundation, that little bit of fire for somebody. That you, everybody
Yeah.
has that opportunity. You just have to be willing to accept it and to pick. I tell people, you got to be willing to pick up that torch. You got to be willing to carry that thing. And if you
Hmm.
are, you have the opportunity to create that impact for people. So that's what I try to do now. I don't think that, you know, there have been so many people that have come into my life and helped me. And I don't think that when they picked up the torch to do what they're doing in their life, they were not thinking about Seth. And I did not know
Right.
who they were, right? When David Pelzer wrote A Child Called It about his own life, he was not thinking of Seth. He wasn't
Right.
thinking about me, and I didn't know who he was. But at some point, our stories, you know, we came to an intersection, a crossroads, and we met one another in a way. And he handed that torch to me, you know, and I
Yeah.
picked
That
up the
is
torch.
awesome.
And that's what I'm doing now with my book. Is my book has gone out into the world. It's sold all in 20 different countries. It's sold like crazy, and it's reached a very large audience. And you know, it's been I'm glad that in a time where our country is so in the world, there's so much
Yeah.
anger and hate and division that I can
Yeah.
share my story and it be inspiring and impactful, and it brings people together for a common good.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, you were like the epitome of what this show is all about, service, people who are serving, and where our world is right now. I mean, my gosh, we know when we're recording this, versus there, we know what's happening today on the news, things like that. It's such a crazy time and people need hope. They really need hope. I mean, people that didn't even know what anxiety and depression and all of that stuff I used to sell for 20 years in your hometown. Like when people didn't even know that that shit existed, they just thought that a antidepressant was Natty Light, and kids just had like Mountain Dew mouth and stuff like that. I mean, that was like the lifestyle that I sold in, and people, we didn't talk about mental health back then as much. And now it's like to see a warrior like you who's accomplished all this stuff, to be able to talk to fellow service members, whether they're first responders and really the whole world, and say, because we have a lot of people who aren't. That's why I'm not a first responder. I've never been a healthcare provider, right? But I've heard people's stories so much with my jobs that that's why we created Splints and Whiskey, was to get y'all's stories out there, and it really helps the community. So number one, I thank you. I love too, if you don't mind, that I just go into this for a second and you can comment on it, but it's badass, man. And it resonated with me today. I hadn't heard this before. I don't know a lot of times what I'm going to ask when we start to talk. I just wanted to go somewhere. And I asked about the higher power thing, and I loved your answer. And if you see stuff about me, a lot of times you see, like, I do a lot of like lead worship and stuff and do stuff, but I've led the youth. I'm not a mom. I've had million kids all over the world. I say I have the United Nations, and like everybody's on, I'll sing karaoke with every kid in the world. But I've always been a youth director, and they're always like, Miss Liz, what if what we're saying is wrong, or what if it's not true? Like, what if it's not true? And I'm like, what I say to the kids is, listen, if you believe in Bob Marley, if you believe in Emerson, if you believe in Walt Whitman, if you believe in Jesus, if whatever you believe in, I say, promise me this, believe in yourself because you're the only one who's going to, right? I mean, I've been through some stuff too, and it's like believe in yourself. And I think that's a killer message, man, that you're telling people. Like it's every day is a new day for an opportunity to help somebody else. You just got to believe you can do it and get off the damn couch and do it.